Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Justin Worland. I'm a senior correspondent at Time Magazine, where I write about all things climate. I have to say I'm very excited to be here. A lot of energy walking through the ChangeNOW corridors, and a lot of energy around entrepreneurship. So I'm especially excited to host this session on the entrepreneurial spirit of change. And we've got a jam-packed hour. So we'll just jump in with a keynote discussion with Frédéric Mazzella, who is the founder and president of BlaBlaCar and Captain Cause. Frédéric. Well, great to be here with you. I want to start with a really big, broad question. As I said, this session is called the Entrepreneurial Spirit of Change. You are an entrepreneur with quite some big successes. What does this mean to you, entrepreneurial spirit of change?
Well, I think entrepreneurial and change are actually very linked. Because usually when you want to start something and you're an entrepreneur, you want to change something, you want to fight some sort of status quo. For this, usually you develop a vision and a mission which will actually drive your energy, your force into the project, the force to actually formulate the vision, the force to federate a team and to convince people to join you, because the most difficult thing when you start something and you have an idea of where you want to go is actually to make sure you don't go there alone, because you will never make it. So you have to make sure a lot of other people are convinced as well by what you're building. So you have to pitch, you have to formulate the vision so that it's rational enough and so that it doesn't just sound like a dream, which you cannot reach. Otherwise, you'll be doing it alone. So you need to link that dream to the reality and create the path and inspire people on the way. So for me, this is really the entrepreneurial spirit of change is really the willingness to change something, the ability to formulate a dream as some sort of a reality with a path to go there, and the ability to bring people together with you in your mission.
So I'm curious to hear a bit about how you think about that spirit of change in the work you've done, and maybe starting with BlaBlaCar.
Well, for BlaBlaCar, so today, so for those of you who are in France or in countries where BlaBlaCar is deployed, you know it's become something very usual and common. So it's 100 million people who are carpooling today. So what we do is carpooling. I precise because we are only in 22 countries, and sometimes people don't know us because we're not in their country. But what we do is carpooling, so we bring people together who share a ride. So drivers with empty seats will propose them to passengers going the same way who will be able to book a seat in their car. So we don't add up any car on the road, we just have empty cars and passengers who book available seats in cars. So with 100 million people on the platform and 20 million in France, so within France it's become very common, but at the very beginning, when I was starting, people would just think it was not possible to actually have people who would meet and drive together because they didn't know each other, or they would fear each other. So what we had to build was really a system of trust, so that you know with whom you will be ride-sharing, carpooling, and so you know beforehand the driver as a passenger, and the passenger knows the driver knows the passenger as well. And so you have a profile, and you have ratings, and you have all sorts of things we check. So we check the ID, we check the driver's license also, and so we have some sort of trust network that we've been able to build. So the change was really to make sure people would trust each other to run in cars, even though the rationale was that all the cars are empty, most of them, and the occupation ratio per car is really, really low on most of the rides that we do, which is a nonsense then, because when you think about all the energy we waste by having all those empty cars on the roads. It's absolutely crazy. I don't know if you know this ratio, but 96% of the energy of a car which is running with only one driver on board is spent on just moving the car, not moving the person. Only 4% is spent on moving the person, and so this is what we actually fight by placing 2, 3, 4, 5 people per car. We divide the amount of energy and the amount of pollution generated per passenger, of course. So it's a very simple equation in many, many ways, because you have empty cars, so obviously there are available seats, and you also overwaste a lot of energy. So that's also why it got so developed, because you save, of course, not only energy, but you save money when you share the cost. So basically, drivers and passengers share the cost, but they share the energy, and they diminish the amount of pollution per person. So the logic of it made it so that the platform worked. But the change was actually to make sure people would trust each other to do that on long distances, which is the case today, and it's growing, of course, now in many countries, from India to Brazil and most of European countries.
Right. Well, many people here have probably used BlaBlaCar and at least are familiar with it, but now you're doing another enterprise, Captain Cause, which maybe is less familiar. It's less of something that you use in your daily life. Can you tell us a bit about Captain Cause? And again, what was the spirit of change that drove your decision to start this?
The underlying spirit of change behind it is that many people have a work life and have personal convictions, and sometimes they don't match. Actually, a lot of the time they don't match. And I don't think this is the best way to release the best energy in every one of us. And it also creates a discomfort, because you think you should be doing something and you're doing something else in your work life, and you spend all your day doing something when you think you should be doing something else, but you do it for just making a living. So the goal is to align personal and professional activities by creating a bridge between companies and impact projects. So what we do is we use the financial resource of companies to actually finance impact projects in the domain of environment, health, and social, so that actually the financial resource of the company can be used to solve some issues, some problems that we witness, that we see every day. Now, it's 93% of the population which is very, very worried about the coming years. 75% of the young generation is actually frightened by future. That's surveys which have been conducted recently. So it's a lot of people who develop some sort of anxiety for the future. And also the problem seems so big that we don't know how to solve it. So as an individual, you're like, okay, what can I do alone? So the big actors should act, and then the consequence is that 90% of the people think the big brand and the big companies should act on climate change, on the social consequences of it. By creating a bridge where companies can invest in associations, in NGOs, and in impact projects, we create a new way to actually solve this issue at scale. And the novelty we bring is that we allow companies to bring their stakeholders in the equation, because what they do is they say, okay, let's put 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, or €1 million that we will distribute to good projects as a company. But then what they do, and that's the innovation in what we bring, is that they will say their customers or their employees that they are responsible for spending that money well. And so they will offer the right to vote or to actually send the money to the project that each individual wants to see get financed. So you receive, let's say, €50, €100 from your company to send them to a project which you think is worth fighting for. And this changes the entire equation of donations, because for companies, it has an interest, of course, to bring the stakeholders who are clients or employees and bring them some purpose, a different purpose in being a friend with the brand. So this unlocks a lot of new funds from companies to impact projects by changing the donation from a scheme of 2 entities, so like someone who gives, someone who receives, to 3 actors, because you have someone who pays, someone who decides who get the money, so the customers or the employees, and then someone, of course, who gets the money to do the work on the ground.
I'm curious about, first, maybe you can just share how much you've done already, because it's impressive how much you've done already, but then also, this seems like there's got to be huge demand for this across the globe. How do you scale this up so that there can be opportunities to create these sorts of financial flows everywhere?
Well, first, we also have to make a change in spirit, because companies have to, I mean, they're slowly getting to that reality, but they have to realize that they need to contribute to the outside, to the world they're benefiting from. 1% for the planet, I don't know if you know this, this association created by Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia. Well, he says, actually, it should be normal that every company pays for the outside world that they are benefiting from. It's actually the cost of doing business. It's a rent that any company should pay to the planet for everything that it's able to produce. And so it's the same spirit that we are bringing with Captain Cause, because we think all companies should think that they have to return what they got from the planet to the planet and help it through the other impact projects. So that's the whole change we're bringing. And in terms of scale, so we are soon counting in millions that we've been able to send to impact projects. It's only the beginning. The official start was 6 months ago, so it's very, very young. However, we see that there is it's a position where technology can really bring something. The platform technology, we are a platform which has 3 faces. One face is the companies, one face is the stakeholders of the companies, so the employees and the individuals and the customers, so people like you and me. And then, of course, the impact projects, the NGOs, the associations in all the domains. So it's a platform which mixes all the energy from all what the actors have to bring. The associations, of course, bring the action. The companies bring the money, and the people bring the implication and the willingness to actually change the world. And
so this will be everywhere?
It can be everywhere, yeah. Well, it's the beginning. When I started BlaBlaCar, it was only in France, and then we expanded in many countries. So it's a platform which can scale in all countries, yes.
Right. One thing I think is so important for startups, for entrepreneurs, is ecosystems. And we're here in an ecosystem where people are meeting and making connections, and you're making connections with Captain Cause. But I'm curious just to get your sense of what more can be done to kind of create these ecosystems that we need to help entrepreneurs tap into some of the same spirit of change that we've been talking about.
Well, yeah, the more we discuss together and help each other, the more we will be able to build something different. So it's happening. If I look at an ecosystem I know, which is the French one, we have been able to count 1,000 companies in the impact, 1,000 new companies, startups, with the impact label, which means they bring a solution or an answer to one of the 17 goals of the United Nations. And so this is a good step, because it means the new generation of entrepreneurs tackle the big challenges that are ahead. I think all the generations of entrepreneurs have always been willing to change something, but now what we have to change becomes obvious. That's the difference. Right. Because we can't do anything else than just agree that there is an issue, and the status quo will not be the solution. Now, that's why the only way to go forward is to think differently, because I think by now we have proven that if we continue doing the same, so more of the same will bring us in the wall. So that's for sure. So we have to be very creative and think differently, and that's where the entrepreneurs bring something new, because actually it's their job to find new ways to do things differently, to change some methods.
Yes, very important, finding ways to think differently. I'm curious, okay, so there are entrepreneurs who are thinking differently, who are working with SDGs in mind. How do you change the mindset with the big corporates? And this is one of the things I find so compelling about Captain Cause, is you're linking these sort of entrepreneurs on the ground with the big companies. But how do you change the mindset across the board so it's, expands beyond the ecosystem?
Well, it's actually a bottom-up approach, because the mentality of individuals, so all the people, whether they are customers or employees, is already changing. And so since companies need customers, and they also need employees, and they need to be able to attract them and to recruit them, which is another issue right now when companies don't actually really comply with what we could think is a future which works for humanity, then they have a lot of difficulty in attracting talent. So companies need employees and they need customers. Customers and employees are changing their minds. Some of them are already totally switched, and a lot of them are actually switching very soon and right now. And so since companies need them, they will need to evolve with them. So the approach of a Captain Cause is to bring the causes into the discussion from the bottom being us as individuals, to actually help companies make this transition and tell them, if you go in that direction, it will be good for you as well and for us. Otherwise, we may just walk away and not buy your products, not work for you.
Right. Well, okay, final question. There could be someone sitting in the audience, maybe not here, but maybe watching, saying, okay, that all sounds nice, but it could all just be a bunch of greenwashing, I mean, the companies can start using Captain Cause, or, these startups, they might, they're not actually doing anything, it's just a way to make money. How do startups avoid greenwashing? How do you answer the concern of some people who are concerned that a lot of this might be blah, 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 if you will?
Well, the thing is, we're talking about money that goes into action through NGOs and external groups of people who are acting on the ground. So we're not talking about communication. So the money doesn't go into communication projects, it goes into action projects. So that makes a lot of difference, because the usage of the money is not to make a good image, it's to actually create and build new projects which are solutions to all the problems we see every day. The other thing is that the companies and the projects themselves actually display what they do. They send a follow-up to the entire company saying, okay, we got this amount of money and this is what we've done in 3, 6, 12 months. So they give a report of what they've been doing. And also, it would be a very bad idea for a company to just hope that you come at Captain Cause and you give money, and you open a new channel of discussion with people who are very convinced and who want to really change things and help projects which need money, to not see that it's a two-way communication. So as a brand, if you come and you're doing greenwashing, it will be very, very tough for you to handle it, because it will backfire immediately.
Right.
Otherwise, when companies want to do greenwashing, what they do is they use a one-way communication channel. And so they hope that people will not be able to respond. But with a community like we're creating on Captain Cause, it's a two-way communication channel. So you can't just come, try to do some greenwashing and hope it will not backfire. It will immediately. So that's why so far we've had 120 companies who followed us so far to create operations. We haven't had any case of any, not even a greenwashing or any suspicion of greenwashing, and not a reaction from the community which would say, oh, this is not fair, because this is not appropriate because this brand or this company doesn't do what they say they do. Or so we haven't had that, and I think the brands who think about greenwashing will think about something else than Captain Cause, because it would be a bad idea to come on Captain Cause to greenwash.
I love that point about the two-way communications. That's very, very apt. Thank you so much, Frédéric.
Thank you very much.
Mazzella, but great conversation. Thank you. Okay, next we have a conversation. I don't. Do you want? Okay. Okay. Next, we have a conversation with Hannah Jones, the CEO of the Earthshot Prize, Santiago Lefebvre, co-founder and CEO of ChangeNOW, and then joining us online, we have Brighton Kaoma, okay, the UN SDSN Youth Director. I don't know or we don't. Okay, sorry. I think maybe we had a technical difficulty, so he won't be joining us. I think Frédéric laid the ground quite well. Oh, he is here. Okay, perfect. Okay, good to have you here, Brighton. I think Frédéric laid the ground quite well, talking about the entrepreneurial spirit, talking about the creation of ecosystems that can help foster that spirit. And so all three of you run organizations that really do that. So I want to give you all an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. What is the role of ecosystems in advancing sustainability, and then of course draw in your own initiatives. So I'll start with you.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
We think that there's a huge new untapped wave of innovation that's happening around the world, and it's fueled by people that are here at the ChangeNOW conference. It's fueled by people that are putting purpose at the heart of how they think about their talent, their time, and their careers. And we find it enormously exciting. So at the Earthshot Prize, every year, official nominators are nominating incredible solutions that are working prototype level, have proven that if they were scaled, could help to repair and regenerate the planet. We look at startups, not-for-profit, cities, governments, youth movements, academia. We're actually business model agnostic. What we care about is those working solutions. But the work of the innovators is hard. I mean, listening to the BlaBlaCar conversation just now, you can tell that being an innovator, it's hard in normal days, even if you're doing a standard commercial project. But if you're trying to take to scale something that's about the environment and something that's about communities and is new and disruptive, as an innovator, you need all the support we can give you. And we think you deserve an unfair advantage. And that's where the Earthshot Prize and organizations like ChangeNOW are platforms for enabling innovators around the world to get that unfair advantage, have access to capital, talent, support, because what the world needs is us to speed solutions to scale.
Great. Santiago.
Yeah, well, I think we all have this image that of the standalone, a success of the entrepreneur. But actually, successful entrepreneurs are most of the time just sometimes the outlier of the ecosystem, or at least the offspring of it. Yeah. So no one manages to create something huge and great and big alone. It really needs to have all the kinds of support, and this is all along the way also, because this is not necessarily the same thing you need when you are starting than when you are growing and later. Well, I will just keep it short right now on this question, but for me this is the first thing to really have in mind, is that without ecosystems you don't have stories of success.
Yeah, absolutely. Brighton, thoughts on this question of ecosystems?
Absolutely, and thank you so much, and very excited to join everybody. Within the SDSN, our primary focus is to think about individuals who are mostly left behind. Ask the ecosystem, what sort of individuals or communities are left behind, and how do you start giving them opportunities and skills to become competitive? And for us, we look at the 1.8 billion young people.
I think we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I think I don't know if there can maybe want to look at the tech here, and we might come back to you. So I'm sorry about that, but it's a little challenging to hear. But I'll come back and I want to just talk a little more about these ecosystems questions, the connections. We were talking a little bit of Frédéric about large corporates, small entrepreneurs. And I'll start with you, Santiago. Here at ChangeNOW, you have a mix, building those kinds of connections. What needs to happen to better connect the big incumbent players with the forward-thinking entrepreneurs to really scale change?
Yeah. Well, when we started ChangeNOW, we had we thought a lot about this ecosystem theory. And everything started, you can see it in the logo there, the three circles. This is a first representation of an ecosystem. Entrepreneurial ecosystems usually starts with the rebels. You have those with the idea, the will to change the world, etc. Then you also have the finance, the fundings to help that. And then the third circle is the skills. Who will be able to help you do that? And the strength of an ecosystem was modelized, not by us, but this is a real theory that exists. This is the area of the crossing of the three circles. Okay. So we started with that, and then we just figured out that the image wasn't complete. We need a lot more different players to complete this ecosystem. And you mentioned the big corporates. That's true. Actually, there are so many partnership opportunities between the solutions that are here and the big corporations. We had many of them happening during the last editions of ChangeNOW. You need to have also laws that are changing. And that is done either by policymakers that have this vision and also by activists that are pushing the opinions to go that way. So this is something super large now. The ecosystem has to be larger and larger because we need all the skills now on this special issue.
Absolutely. Hannah, I want to ask you the same question. You were in the corporate world before the Earthshot Prize doing sustainability work. I mean, how do you think these two can connect?
Well, I think we have to be very realistic about how a corporation operates and what it needs to be successful. Sometimes the startups are too small, and a corporation can actually kind of drown them out. But other times, the corporation is just moving too slowly, and we need to figure out how to speed them up and connect them with the startup. So there's a myriad of problems, including just the force of inertia that you see around the world. Where we sit with the Earthshot Prize is we want to wrap support around our finalists. Every year we have a cohort of finalists, and we've been building a fellowship program which wraps around them both content and curriculum and community, but also advisors. And then what we do is we curate and matchmake, bringing them together with our Global Alliance of partners who come from corporations, philanthropy, VCs, and we try to have a very curated conversation so that we can actually see the results that come from that and show models of scale. I think the final point to make, which is so important, is we need the world's imagination to be sparked by the incredible ingenuity of the innovators that we're all seeing. And so there, what we're really intentional about is how do we put the spotlight on these new innovations and hold them up to the world and say, this is the incredible opportunity we have. If we make these solutions the new normal, think of the world we could be in. So how do we collectively diminish the fear of change? We talk a lot about change, and entrepreneurs love change, and everybody else hates it. So we have to cross that bridge with storytelling and models of success and showing things going to scale together.
Absolutely, sparking that entrepreneurial spirit of change. I love that. Should we try to go to Brighton again? I don't know if we had a chance to look at the tech. Brighton. Oh. Okay, maybe we can just ask the question about creating ecosystems and how that applies to the work you're doing, what you think needs to be done.
Absolutely. I'm hoping that I'm much clearer now.
Much better, much better.
Excellent. No, I'm very excited. And I think for us, it's looking at, when we look at the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, who are the communities that are mostly left behind? In most cases, it's the young people, majority of them coming from the global south. So it creates opportunities for them to access a series of entrepreneurial tools for them to develop their local solutions, specifically addressing the Sustainable Development Goals. As you might know, we are almost halfway into the implementation of the goals. And what happens between this particular decade of action is going to pretty much determine the future generation and some of the accomplishments they're going to witness in their lifetimes. So one important aspect in the ecosystem is how do we identify these areas of acupuncture in terms of not only supporting established entrepreneurs, but also looking at those early stage entrepreneurs that don't have a strong foothold in the ecosystem and giving them the tools, the networks, the resources they need for them to, most importantly, become investment ready. And we've been doing this by looking at young people that have ideas on like mobility, ideas on urban sustainability, ideas on creating enterprises that help reduce emissions or provide access to healthcare or the determinants of health, the social determinants of health. But all this has been anchored on partnerships, which is also very well articulated in SDG number 17 on creating partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals. So I would say creating partnerships which identify solutions that are locally ingrained and are delivering local solutions to local challenges that communities face around the world.
Great, yeah, that's great. Well, picking up on that theme of the global nature of your work, I want to turn to Hannah. You recently announced that there will be the first Earthshot Prize Awards in Singapore. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk a bit about why it's important to do that, to do the awards there, and then also to talk a bit about the importance of building global ecosystems, not just being here in Paris and in the Silicon Valley places and et cetera, you know.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Well, the Earthshot Prize is a global prize, and our intention is that each year we go to a different city and a different region as a way of spreading the Earthshot movement and really bringing the spotlight to stories of innovation and solutions and leapfrogging that's happening in those regions and in those cities. We love to put the spotlight on innovation and best practices and see how they can be shared around the world and replicated. So Singapore was a natural choice for us as a gateway into a conversation across Asia. We all know that Asia has been hard hit already by climate change and is already looking at the implications of what it means to be a resilient society and change rapidly in the face of climate change. One of the things that we're so excited about is how much innovation we're seeing happening in environmental solutions that are not-for-profit, for-profit, city, state, government, youth movement, academia, you name it. It's incredible. So we want to bring those stories and share them with the world. So Singapore, Asia, really interesting innovations. And the thing is that we need to feel like a global community, because there are solutions that are being birthed in Asia that could have application in Paris. And there are solutions in Paris that could have applications in Singapore. And so a lot of what we do is look for how we can find solutions that can be gifted and could be replicable in other areas. There is a huge amount of innovation out there, but the conversation isn't joined up enough. And we're not taking those solutions and thinking how we can plug and play them fast enough. We have to break down those barriers of information and barriers of collaboration and really move to a next level. We have this decade. This is the Earthshot decade. This is the decade in which by 2030, we have to reduce emissions by 40% and protect 30% of oceans and 30% of nature. And we will only get there by fueling these ecosystems through radical collaboration and removing the competitive and the silent barriers.
Absolutely. Santiago, I want to turn to you. So we're talking a bit about connecting global ecosystems, but at the same time, we know that a lot of collaboration does happen in the backyard with people who you're nearby. And you recently touted Paris as a potential, I think is a quote, Florence of the Green Renaissance. So curious, how do you see Paris becoming, this Florence of the Green Renaissance? And then what can places around the world learn from the work that's happening in Paris right now that they might be able to apply?
Yeah, well, just the first thing regarding that is that if you look at history, the main moments where there has been a civilization shift or something really meaningful in the transition of the society, the Renaissance was one, for example. You had a place where we had an immense intensity of talent, of funding, of everything they needed, of political support also. And because maybe you don't know, but in the same house you had Da Vinci, Michelangelo, but also Machiavelli, for example. Even the thinkers of philosophy were next to the painters and next to the sculptors and the inventors. They were all in the same place, actually, and supported by a group of financiers, of funders at this moment. So this is true for the Renaissance. What happened in the Silicon Valley is totally the same thing. The presence of Stanford, of all those big successes also of startups comes from an ecosystem that is stronger than everywhere else on the planet. And so the bet we do here actually is to think that we need to crystallize that also for the impact transition. And we need to find a place. And we identify that Paris has already a lot of great entrepreneurs, or a lot of great NGOs, of great corporations acting on water, waste management, and many other things. So there is a field for that. And on top of this, there are the Paris Accords. And I feel totally convinced that no other place or no other city than Paris is in the best place to defend their Paris Accord.
I love that. Best place to defend the Paris Agreement. Brighton, I want to turn to you. So much of the conversation we've been talking about, how do you spread ideas, spread stories so that people can really tap into this entrepreneurial spirit of change. You hosted in previous, when you were a little bit younger, a radio and podcast program that reached, I believe it's 2 million people a week, which is really astounding. Help elevating stories and elevating the voices of young people. And of course, you're working to sort of tell those stories and bridge those communities now. I'd be curious to hear your thought about the best ways to really give young people the knowledge and ability to make change using stories.
Absolutely. I think it's very exciting to just hear about the Earthshot Prize, but also what ChangeNOW is doing in voices. I think my strongest belief is let young people tell their stories, full stop. I think if they tell their stories and you give them a global platform, you then amplify the sharing of best practices and knowledge and already existing solutions. I think Anna did refer to this about how we can be able to create the replicability of different solutions towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, meeting net zero goals, and all many different targets that we already are discussing. Growing up in an environment in Zambia where sometimes when it rains, kids like myself and others couldn't attend classes, also experiencing the blunt consequences of pollution from mineral extraction, invoked that desire to think about telling stories of ordinary individuals using the most accessible and inexpensive medium, which was radio at the time. And just seeing how there was a cascade effect of building a movement that brought women, young people, civil society leaders, leaders in business and government towards one common goal of taking climate action. So being able to tell these stories not only amplified the challenges that existed in communities, but it also provided a space to engage in co-creating solutions that spoke to the needs of the community, the needs of leaders, and the greatest aspiration of young people. So now coming back to, scaling these, processes of storytelling globally, what we're doing within SDSN Youth is to think about creating spaces where young people can have a community where they can belong and feel included, irrespective of where they are from and irrespective of their stage of development. So we eliminate these barriers to entry, which is normally spaces which are selective. I think when you go to most spaces, it's young people that have had access to the best education, the best opportunities. But we are breaking all those barriers by including everybody, irrespective of where you're from, how you look, how you speak. And we give you a space to speak about your story, the challenges you're faced with, and what you're doing about it, the key actions that you are taking. So across our incubator programs, the focus is primarily on helping young people tell their authentic stories with clarity, and we give them the tools and resources they need for them to be able to do that.
That's great. I want to ask both of the panelists up here about youth as well. How well, I mean, there's so much enthusiasm with young people about this, so much concern. What is the role of older generations to help channel that enthusiasm into this spirit of change? How can institutions evolve to do that better? And I'd love to hear from both of you on that.
I can jump on this one. You know, I grew up hearing my parents and my parents' generation saying, the next generation will have to handle the issue, you know. And at some point, we started ChangeNOW also because I said, okay, they were talking about my generation, you know. I have to do something. People told me that already young people is already saying this issue will be handled by next generation. Okay. So I think that we have now, our generation at least, and through what we are doing, this is also something we try to do, is that we try to do enough so they keep faith in the future. So they feel empowered enough to go to say, okay, this is also my turn to continue, and do not reject the responsibility to the next generation. So this is for me how I see the relationship with the younger generations, how we can just inspire them, the fact that we are still acting and that they can do the same thing. And I hope we are doing a good job. Let's see in the future on that.
I have a bit of a different opinion, maybe. I think we just need to get out of the way. I think that the Gen Z millennials that we meet on a daily basis are doing it. They're already choosing. They're saying, get out of my way. I want my time, my talent, my career to be centered around purpose. And what I need from you is your power, is your wisdom, is your battle scars of being in business. I need you to get behind me, decenter yourself out of here, and help me do what I came here to do. I see this amazing inspirational determination and grit and ingenuity in the younger community, and they're all coming here. This is fantastic. You're creating that platform for them. I think businesses know that if they're not offering purpose to this new generation, they will not get the best talent. I think this next generation is the generation that's going to teach us all, and we can't get there fast enough to seed power, capital, and support to them immediately and give them the platform to run with it.
Excellent. Well, Brighton, last word on this question. What do you want to see from older generations to really empower youth to help elevate the work that you're doing?
Thanks, Justin. The most important thing is action. Action now, both in business, government, and society. And also embracing intergenerational equity, because that's what we need. I think leaders in business, government, and civil society should realize that young people today are inevitably leading change. If we look at what has happened, even in history, it's the young people that led the process of transformation. So I think it's very unfair that they are not given the opportunity and the space to lead change and be supported. So leaders of the world need to act, not yesterday, but they need to act today and urgently. Because if they don't act now, young people will continue to act and lead them like they are already doing.
Well, we have just under a minute left, and I'm tempted to leave it there because that's such a great ending. But thank you to this excellent panelist. I think it was a very engaging, interesting conversation to hear about the work you're doing, which I think should be modeled elsewhere as well. So thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and for our final segment, we have Charlot Magayi, who's the CEO and founder of Mukuru Clean Stoves. Well, Charlot, you have a very remarkable story about how you came to found Mukuru Clean Stoves, and I wonder if you could just start by telling us that story, and then, of course, in doing that, telling us a bit about what Mukuru Clean Stoves does.
Thank you. So my name is Charlot Magayi, like Justin said, and I'm from Kenya. I grew up in Mukuru. It's one of the biggest slums in Nairobi, and I was orphaned at a really young age. But at 16, I became a mom, and we used an inefficient stove to cook. So when my daughter turned 2, she suffered a very severe burn injury, and that is the reason why I started Mukuru Clean Stoves.
We often talk about win-win ideas in the climate SDG space, and Mukuru really has a lot of these wins, and I just wonder if you can walk us through, exactly how it works. What are the different things that Mukuru is delivering to, lower costs, lower air pollution, et cetera, et cetera?
So a Mukuru stove is an improvement of the traditional stove, and what it does is it enables families to fight, household air pollution. So when you use our stove with the right type of fuel, you can reduce up to 90% of the emissions. That also means that the cost of fuel reduces by up to 60%, and it reduces the risk of accidents in children under the age of 5, which is why we started the business in the first place. So initially, I wanted to build a stove that would be stable enough to ensure that if a child below the age of 5 comes into contact with it, there wouldn't be an accident. But then in doing research and doing that, I realized that wasn't even the biggest problem my community was facing. So I had to make a stove that would solve all these 3 problems and ensure that we can economically empower our community while solving that solution.
And so, since you've been doing this, tell us how you've scaled. I mean, how many people have you reached? How much impact has this had?
Thank you. We recently just won the Earthshot prize last year. Thank you. And we currently have a presence in 275,000 households within Western Kenya alone. We're scaling across Africa as well, again with the help of Earthshot and the Global Alliance. And essentially what we're trying to do is ensure that as we provide this solution, we are empowering the local communities that we're trying to work with to be able to distribute the solution within the households that it needs to be in. We work with low-income communities. That is our primary target market. And to reach them, this is like last mile communities. We have to partner with people like local women business owners, local chiefs, local governments, to ensure that we have access to the actual people that need the stove, who, for reasons like infrastructure and other limitations, would not typically have a stove or have access to that stove.
Absolutely. Well, you sort of mentioned it in passing, but one of the win-wins here is the work empowering women. And so I wonder if you could touch a little bit more about that. As I understand it, you rely 100% on women entrepreneurs as distribution agents. So what was the choice to do that, and what has been the effect of that on these communities?
I mean, early on when I started my business, I had this quote. I'm not sure who said it, but it goes, the greatest tool for economic development is women empowerment. And household air pollution primarily affects women and children. So when you know what the impact of dirty cooking is, then you can sell the solution a little bit better. And so we figured, how about we partner with the people who are most impacted to try and distribute this solution to as many people as possible. We currently work with 470 local women business owners who distribute our stoves, which are $10, by the way. That is 75% cheaper than a stove with the same type of power, and they earn a 10% commission on every stove that they sell.
I want to just ask about this point about the cost, because that's clearly an important element of the win-win. And I'm curious, to what degree, when the agents are talking to people, is cost their biggest concern, or are they concerned about air pollution? What is the thing that resonates most with people on the ground?
I mean, when you talk to the people in this room, maybe cost is not a factor, but when you talk to a household that earns $40 to $100 monthly income, if you're gonna sell them a product, even if it is life-saving, it has to economically make sense. So cost is always the first question. So that is why when we started making a Mukuru stove, we had to ensure that that was the first, point that was the first thing to address. So we sought out to basically manufacture our stoves using recycled metal that we get locally, and this ensures that we are able to provide it at a dramatically low cost compared to a stove that does the same work but is imported or maybe made using different products.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. In the previous sessions, we talked a lot about ecosystems, and the Earthshot Prize, which again you won. But I'm curious to hear a little bit about the ecosystems that helped you get this off the ground and scale it to where you are. The Earthshot Prize being one of them, but any others that you found support and networking growth opportunities through. How important has that been?
It's been crucial. I think now I have access to Earthshot, I have access to Kati and other ecosystems. But before that, you find that in communities like the one I came from, a lot of us are entrepreneurs because there are no jobs, but also because there's just so many problems to solve. So you find that a lot of young people will turn to entrepreneurship, not just to create jobs, but to create solutions that would help empower that specific community. And so there were an ecosystem just within that community for me. People were already doing something something different, maybe something similar, but within that space, who would essentially mentor you and teach you how entrepreneurship would work on a very local level. So once you have achieved a bit of impact within that community, then we would be able to get out and get access to people outside of our community. But it began, in Mukuru and Kibera in slums, where we have people like Kennedy Odede, who for years, they have made solutions to try to, impact the lives within that specific community. And then, and only after you have impacted lives there and realize that your solution is working, then you're able to scale it and get access to larger ecosystems.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. I think it's a good reminder that even as we talk about, what can you learn, what can you, or what not you, but what can one learn from Paris, what can one learn from Silicon Valley, there's actually a lot happening in communities on the ground that we all might be able to learn from. I'm curious, to hear from you about going from the local community, the local ecosystem that helped get this off the ground, to then this big global platform that you now have. What were the sort of institutions that helped in that in between, and then now you're on this global stage?
I think when you have access to a small group of people who are helping you, learn how you can impact lives, and you start to dream a little bit bigger. So now it's not just about providing stoves in Mukuru, it's about providing stoves across Kenya or across one county in Kenya. Then you're pushed to get out. And once you get out, because essentially that is your comfort zone, that is where everybody understands what you're doing, but now you have to get out of that space and find somebody else who is not within that community. So for me, there were communities like SOCAP or YGAP where we would essentially go look for them to try and pitch what we were doing. And for the most part, they didn't understand. Because if it is not a problem that affects you, then you don't know what I'm talking about. And that is where the discomfort came from, having to tell someone why it's important to back you to provide a solution that they, for instance, do not even realize is something that's needed. But we've had opportunities to get on, those big stages to be pitched to those investors. And we've had some of them come to us. Like our very first investor found us in Mukuru in my very small, shack. And there was no space. Like, there are 2 seats. He sat there with his daughter, and I sat on the table, and I pitched him a dream of building a really big factory and asked him for $50,000, which then was a lot of money for me. But that was my community then. They came to find me, and they supported me and enabled me to grow, to get outside of Mukuru.
Have you found that your message needs to change as you go from talking to people at a more local level to at a global level?
It always needs to change. I think I found that later on. In the beginning, I would just talk about stoves and the impact that it had within the households, but then now you had to integrate climate change. How are your stoves impacting our environment? Is it in a good way or is it in a bad way? And what can you do to ensure that this impact is scaled to be able to, empower a majority across the continent or across the world? So our messaging, our communication has changed significantly over the years, and now we are not just talking about cook stoves, you're talking about carbon credits, and we are having other conversations like malaria and how we can solve for that using these specific stoves.
Well, you recently launched the Mukuru Clean Stove Foundation to help with education on climate change, and so could you just tell us a little bit about what the foundation will do and how you're doing it?
Yeah, so the work that we're going to do with the foundation, we're already doing with Mukuru Clean Stoves. We just found that for a solution like improved cook stoves, if you're trying to distribute it in a community that does not even understand that there is a problem, there needed to be education before you're able to accelerate adoption. And so Mukuru Clean Stoves the foundation is coming in to ensure that we are able to educate in mass and ensure that a lot of people get the messaging and understand why a Mukuru stove is very important to be used. But we're also using the foundation to develop a new malaria-fighting briquette, because the solution was a stove for a very long time. We've been doing this for 6 years. But then we realized that people could burn just anything on the stove. So we needed to come up with a fuel that they could burn on our stoves. And that fuel needed to solve another problem. And we realized that a lot of people catch malaria when they're cooking. So even when they have access to mosquito nets, they still get malaria. So if they are using a Mukuru stove, how can our product solve that problem? So we're using the foundation to do research into developing malaria-fighting briquettes, and hopefully when that works, we will be able to scale it across the world.
It's amazing. I love the thinking of new products, but they're all impact-oriented. It's just such a different, compelling model of what a company can do. You talked about education first, and I want to hear a little bit more about what that education looks like. Mm-hmm. And then sort of as a second part to that question, how do you inspire more people, particularly women, to become entrepreneurs and to tackle climate and environmental issues?
Even with the education, we work with women still. Clean cooking, I understand that it's not just a women's problem, but it is a problem that women understand best and women can solve for best. So even when we educate, we partner with local women groups. And the reason why we do that is we sell our stoves in rural areas. And in rural areas, in every single market, there is one popular women group. So they are like the influencers within that community, and they're able to communicate or distribute information a little bit better. So we will partner with them and do little road shows or what we call demos. And what that entails is us setting up, our products within the local market during a market day and demonstrating how it works to show you the difference between a Mukuru stove and a traditional stove or an open fire, and working with these women to be able to do that, because then they trust the product if it is coming, if the information is coming from the women that they trust most, or the women who essentially have been able to distribute products to them and they've been able to see that there is a difference. So that is how we do the work and how we inspire people. I think on your previous panel, you were talking about storytelling and allowing young people to tell their stories. Is when you tell a story, like I am doing this job and maybe we won the Earthshot, but this is where we came from. We came from Mukuru, from very humble beginnings, and there's a young girl who wants to start a business, then they see that there is a way. They see that, in the end, they will be able to achieve the impact that they're trying to achieve, or they will be able to achieve something. So just storytelling is very big for us at Mukuru and very big for me personally. Just always reminding people that it might look like this, but this is where it began, and you can always start from somewhere. And that is the biggest tool that I have used to inspire young people, especially.
Absolutely, and it's very, very inspirational. I'm curious, obviously you're here telling the story. How do you get that story to communities, to people, who may be, where you were not so long ago? How do you get that story out there?
We work with them. We work within those communities. So, for instance, young people who are doing something like weaving, to provide, just make a living or be able to provide for their families. We're able to provide mentorship programs for them. We're able to have conversations with them about what that could look like, and it doesn't always need to scale.
Right.
As long as you're doing something that impacts a life, it doesn't need to impact 1,000 lives right now. It can always just impact 1 or 2 lives, as long as it's able to make a difference. So reaching out to people, for instance, in Mukuru, where I came from, always ensuring that you go back to try to communicate the importance of creating solutions within that community or even in a different community, just to try and always impact lives. Because as we have seen over the years, in the beginning it was you have to make a profit and then impact will come later. But we're seeing more and more that changing, that you can make impact and profit can follow, and it can follow in a big way. So impact doesn't have to be the first thing that's on the table. Profit doesn't have to be the first thing that's on the table. You can always begin with impact and look into making profit a bit later.
Begin with impact. That's great. I want to ask about, you mentioned carbon credits, obviously really complicated, some ways controversial area, but how are you navigating that, and what is the potential to help you really scale with these carbon credits?
You were talking about greenwashing, and a lot of things are complicated, especially in the climate space. But what we are trying to achieve, for instance, at Mukuru, is to provide a stove that is able to reduce emissions, essentially reduce carbon emissions. And so if we can leverage carbon credits to ensure that we get that stove into as many households as possible, as long as there is accountability, and as long as, again, you're focusing on impact, not the amount of money you could make from that, it's always very beneficial. So at Mukuru, what we do is we sell our clean cook stoves, and the credit from that is sold to be able to sell more stoves out there. So essentially, the plan is for every stove that we sell, we should be able to get another stove within the next household by use of revenues from carbon credits.
Wow, that's a great ratio. You sell one and get another. We've talked quite a bit about the various things that you're working on, but I want to give you one other opportunity to cover anything else that's on your mind that's coming next. That's what your plans are for the coming few years.
Mm-hmm. I was just talking to you about malaria-fighting briquettes. I think that is what we are most excited about at Mukuru, because it's going to be able to solve so many problems, but two specifically, household air pollution, but malaria as well. So we are in the process of, R&D for this specific product. We're getting a lot of help from Cartier and Earthshot and other partners. And the reason why I'm so excited about this is because we feel like we've gotten to a point where our communities are starting to accept and understand the benefits of clean cooking, and more of them are looking to adopt, clean cook stoves. So we feel like this is the right time to come in and introduce a new fuel and ensure that they're able to, adopt that as well. But this is the one product that we are 100% sure will not just stay in the African continent. We can distribute this, in Europe. We can distribute it in the US. For those of us who go camping and are always looking for fuels that can do 2 for 1, we're talking about young people, especially millennials and Gen Z, who are focused on change. Like, how is the product that I'm using impacting my environment? So we're not just banning whatever it is we can ban so we can get a good barbecue. We care about what we're going to be banning. And I'm excited that Mukuru Clean Stoves is in a position to be able to be a part of that journey, with the next generation. we're excited that we are not just providing a solution that is specifically, for low income, but we're able to reach, higher earning customers who might even be able to subsidize the cost for the people that need it the most.
So I know you're still in R&D, but what is this going to look like? Are you going to go to communities around the world and engage in the same way, talking to people who are buying the fuel around the world, or what does the scale of this look like? It's quite exciting.
So that's the thing. The scale of it is pretty much worldwide. With stoves, you look at sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, maybe even Latin America. But with this fuel, you look at a global market. The beauty of it is when you ban, a Mukuru fuel, it's gonna be turning your household into essentially a mosquito repellent zone. So that is saving your life. And when a camper goes maybe camping in the US and he buys this specific stove, he doesn't have to, be fighting insects, within that forest or whatever it is, that whatever place he goes camping. So it's gonna look like a product that is making the life of millennials in America easier and more fun, and they feel like they are creating or they are participating in the protection of the environment, while ensuring that low, earning communities are able to benefit from the same product, but for them it is a life-saving product. So it is providing very different, solutions for different demographics, but at the end of the day, we have enough reach to be able to create significant impact.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Charlotte, for this conversation. Very inspirational. I learned a lot, and frankly, it's inspiring to see going from a real local solution to global impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.